Well, I think in the first instance, the government can claim credit for reducing immigration from about 250,000 down to about 150,000. But the issue is about the accuracy of the absolute data. We can take it on the basis that they've done very well on the basis of trend, but when we come down to measuring the absolute numbers, then it's far too blunt. The way in which they collect the data is too inaccurate, and the margin for error is far too great.
Let's talk historically for a moment, if we can. I mean, this data presumably is as accurate as any data we've ever had on migration.
Yes, I mean, actually, it's been made a little bit more accurate between 2009 and 2011, so there have been some improvements. So when we look to 2009-10, when the figure was about 250,000, for example, there's a margin of error of about 35,000 on that. So that could have been much, much closer to 300,000. And when the government quote figures of 153,000 now, then that could be 35,000 fewer or 35,000 higher. So the margin for error is quite great. And bearing in mind the priority in which the public place on this, we need absolutely accurate, robust data. It decides how much money goes to local authorities, it decides how much money goes to the devolved nations, and obviously it decides policy about housing, policy around health and so many other areas.
Well, it raises a lot of questions. I'm sure a lot of viewers would agree with you that they want this sort of very accurate data because it is so important in what happens financially as much as anything else and socially. How do you go about gathering it at a reasonable cost?
Well, that's the issue. The various departments in the government, the Home Office, for example, needs to make its data available on a computer system that is compatible with what the Office for National Statistics collect, and the e-border controls that is being rolled out across the country. That data will have very useful information, and when we bring all sources together, we will have absolutely robust copper bottom guarantees, if you like, that the numbers are spot on. Because at the moment we can only look at trends, and significant progress has been made in reducing immigration according to those trends, but we can't be absolutely dependent on the numbers that are being quoted.
It's interesting the response you've had from the Home Office on this, because, I mean, they haven't accepted or denied it in a way. They've dismissed the report simply saying immigration levels, net migration levels are at the best in a decade. They haven't addressed the issue that this is based purely on trend.
Well, when they're talking about the best in the decade, of course, that's demonstrating the trends, but we cannot quote the number without taking into account the margin for error. The 35,000 either way is quite significant. And if you take the numbers of net migration over 2 years, then that could well be the size of a city like Liverpool, for example, coming to live in the UK. Or if you reduce the margin for error over that 2-year period, then it would be much different in that a city the size of Liverpool is not coming to live in the UK. So public policy decisions are based on this. It's a key priority for all political parties, but particularly for the governments as a serious issue. If you accept the findings of any opinion poll, immigration is what most people say troubles them most, and therefore we need absolutely robust data. But in terms of the progress of the government at the moment, we can only compare it with the way in which it was being collected, and you have to compare like with like. So it's fair to say very good progress is being made, but we cannot be dependent on the absolute numbers that are being quoted.